Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of HeadCoachU. I am Bryan Fischer, joined, as always, by former BYU and Virginia head coach Bronco Mendenhall. And Bronco, we're changing things up just a little bit, going from football to the other kind of football. Thrilled to welcome on the head coach of the North Carolina women's soccer program, a legend in the business, Anson Dorrance. Anson, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I was reading through your bio and you know, your list of accomplishments. I mean, I think it's one of those multi-page type of efforts, given the national titles that you've won. Been there in Chapel Hill for over 40 years. But you grew up and you were born overseas. And I'm kind of curious, as someone who also grew up overseas when I was younger, how did that kind of shape your approach to being a head coach?
Well, honestly, I have no idea how it shaped my approach to being a head coach, but it certainly gave me a unique worldview. And also, I think it gave me a really interesting segue into athletics, because one of the things that really I took advantage of every time we moved is I would jump into the local sports scene. And all the different places I live, they're all playing different sports. And so I developed a passion for almost every sport that's out there. So based on where we were being raised during that stretch, I jumped into whatever the local sports scene was, and I absolutely loved it. And honestly, it helped us with the moves. So we would move from one country to the other, and of course, you're embraced immediately if you have any sort of athletic ability by the local sports teams, and you've got a collection of friends right out of the gate, regardless of the sports you're playing. And so for me, I think it really benefited me that I absolutely loved athletics and didn't care what the sport was. And I think that caused me to, I guess, fall in love with that lifestyle. And so when I got to UNC, to be completely honest, I was a good soccer player, but I wasn't necessarily an extraordinary one. But I fell in love with sports. And when I got to UNC, the first thing that happened is I moved into Teague dorm. The head intramural manager in Teague came down to my room, and he had a clipboard, and he said, Anson, we're so excited you're in Teague. We hear you're an athlete. Please look at this list of winter and spring sports and tell me if you think you're good enough to compete for the dorm in any one of these sports. And so he hands me this clipboard. I look at it for several minutes and I hand it back to him. I said, listen, you want to win? You put me on every single team. He thought I was joking. I wasn't joking. So they put me on every single team, and we started an 11-year intramural sports dynasty. We beat everyone to death and everything. And of course, my greatest pride in beating everyone to death and everything, and Bronco will appreciate this because, of course, football sits, at the apex of any sort of athletic program. So what I enjoyed is beating all those football players to death in every sport because I don't look like much, but I'm fierce and I'm coordinated, and I'm going to take you out. And we did. Our favorite games were against Erringhouse A, which is where all the football players lived. And I made it a mission to try to beat them in every sport. I would, try to get 9 hours sleep the night before. I'd be hydrated going into whatever it was. And yeah, we took everyone apart. We also took apart the basketball program. We didn't care who you were, what sports you played. We were going to annihilate you and everything. And also, I really believed in winning absolutely everything. So we started recruiting. We had to be the first dorm intramural team to recruit. So we would find out the best athletes in each hometown that was coming to the University of North Carolina. And we would ask that athlete to move into Teague. And then we would do something else that was ridiculous for intramural sports. We would actually practice. What a novel idea. Practicing your horseshoes before you went out there and threw a couple. So we took this very seriously. And I'll be honest, I've been a part of 3 dynasties. And I wouldn't rank my intramural sports dynasty behind the United States full national team that has been winning world championships and gold medals forever, or my women's soccer dynasty at UNC. I love sports. I love everything about it. I love competing. And for me, that was the first dynasty I was a part of. And to be completely honest, I am very proud of it. And So for me, I love everything about athletics.
Would you say that was maybe the entry point into coaching as you're recruiting players into the dorm and then starting practice? Is that when you think, wait a second, this coaching thing could be for me?
Well, no, honestly, I didn't think this coaching thing was for me. I just loved it. It was like circulating blood. It was like breathing. This wasn't like a choice I made. This is who I was. Because wherever I lived in the world, I was organizing the local, whatever it was, game. Whether it was a badminton tournament in Singapore, or a marbles competition in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, or, part of the boxing team in Nairobi, Kenya. Yeah, I was gonna organize it because I was very serious about winning everything. No, I was never interested in coaching ever. My dad was an oil businessman, and by the time I was in college, he had this ambition to start his own oil company. And we were going to have a 30,000 barrel per day oil refinery in Morehead City, North Carolina, in, I think, Savannah, Georgia, and in Jacksonville, Florida. So I don't know if you guys remember when we were hijacked. This oil pipeline company was hijacked in the South. My dad's, I guess, vision was going to solve that problem. And so his vision for me was to be his corporate attorney. I never thought about coaching, not even for a second. He wanted me to be his corporate attorney. The family joke at the time is if I ended up serving as his corporate attorney, at least I wouldn't have a tendency to steal from my own estate. So that was my dad's sense of humor. So I loved my father. I was a dutiful son. So I went to law school as a favor to my father, knowing that, I was going to retire on a yacht in the Mediterranean at the end of this distinguished career where eventually, of course, I would own the business. And then what was really cool for me is the guy I played for at UNC, a wonderful gentleman by the name of Dr. Marvin Allen, was retiring. So he went in and spoke to my athletic director, Mr. Bill Kobe, and said, Bill, why don't you hire Anson to serve as my successor? And apparently Bill liked the idea. So he calls me up out of the blue, my AD, and he says, Anson, I'd love to, chat with you a bit about the head coaching position. I'm thinking, great, I've got some ideas on who they should hire. So I went in there fully prepared with 4 or 5 names of who I thought were the best, college male soccer coaches in the country. And I'm in there and I've got my list ready to go, and I'm ready to, bloviate on any one of them to convince Mr. Bill Kobe to hire these extraordinary, distinguished gentlemen with great resumes. And before I got a word out of my mouth, he said, Anson, I would love for you to be our head men's soccer coach. And my jaw almost hit the floor. I was 23 years old. If I ascended to that position, I was going to be coaching guys I played with. I didn't have a coaching resume. My coaching resume was I was a Rainbow Soccer Coach, which is a co-educational rec league in Chapel Hill. In fact, whenever I speak about this topic, I always enjoy teasing all of my colleagues that had to, slog through the mines to get to the level where they were coaching collegiately from high school to, junior college to, Division III, and then finally climb their way in Division I. I go from co-ed rec soccer to the top of Division I. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I absolutely fell in love with it. And then while I'm finishing my law degree, and by the way, I took a course shy each semester in order to coach. So I wasn't taking 5 classes a semester. I was taking 3. Normally you graduate law school in 3 years. I was going into my 4th year to finish my law degree. And in the spring before that 4th fall rolled around, Mr. Kobe said, Anson, I want you to come watch this women's club play. And I said, well, why is that, Mr. Kobe? He says, well, this women's club has petitioned for varsity status. And of course, 1972, Richard Nixon, Title IX has come into view. And of course, I think all the ADs at the time were afraid of some, lawsuit that would take them apart. And so I'm going out there as a favor to my athletic director to see if, we're going to make this club a varsity. And I watched them play. Yep, they're organized and they're committed. And I say, yeah, Mr. Kobe, we should make them a varsity. I think the coach has done a good job. And now I'm shilling for their coach. These kids have done a good job. They've committed to it. Let's make them a varsity. I'll share facilities with them. I don't want to have an issue and blah, 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 blah. And then he says, Anson, if you will coach both teams, I will make your part-time men's position full-time. And honestly, I was making a fraction of what my wife was making. She was basically putting me through law school. I felt a little sheepish about not really contributing to the family. And so basically, I hate to admit this, but for the money, I decided I was going to coach both teams. And then before you know it, I'm in law school. I'm coaching the men, I'm coaching the women. I'm getting 4 to 6 hours sleep at night. And I don't know about you two guys, I cannot function without sleep. And I am just exhausted. And I come home one day and I'm sheepishly walking into my living room to talk to my wife. And I said, honey, I know your dream was to, again, retire on this yacht in the Mediterranean, but I've decided to drop out of law school. I love this coaching gig. And if you don't mind, honey, I would love to be a soccer coach. And she said, Anson, I love the fact you love this. We're going to be okay. We're going to be happy. We don't have to have any money. And boy, was that a very bold step for her to take. And sure enough, we were on starvation wages, but I didn't regret one day of my life. And to be honest, I was a miserable law student. I wasn't much of a scholar growing up. In fact, my dad used to tease me all the time about my original academic award. I've only won 2 academic awards in my life. My first one, I won the English award at St. Joseph's School in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Why? Because I was the only white kid in the school, and I was the only kid in the school who actually spoke English at home. So congratulations, Anson. You've won the English award at St. Joseph's School in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And honestly, that was kind of cool because Haile Selassie, the Lion of Judah, extended me my honor. So I went to the palace and, like the rest of the scholars across the city, and picked up the English award as the only white-faced person in the entire ceremony. So I thought that was kind of cool. Then the only other award I won was the religion award at La Villa Saint-Jean in Freiburg, Switzerland, because I used to debate my religion professors all the time, actually about Africa. So this is a school in Freiburg, Switzerland. And of course, I was raised a Catholic. And I used to debate these guys about, the only way you get to heaven as a Catholic is if you have some exposure to Jesus Christ. And I used to say, this is ridiculous. You mean you are condemning the whole continent of Africa because of an accident of geography? Are you frigging kidding me? So I would spend every religion class in full debate with every theologian that they sent to educate these young Catholic boys. Then the irony is, even though I'm bitterly debating all of these guys all 4 years, they wanted me to join the priesthood. I was thinking, my gosh, they're inviting the fox into the hen house. I just can't believe, how liberal they were in the net they threw to try to recruit priests. And of course, I decided not to go in that direction. But I'm not a scholar, never have been, never will be. I love to read, and I certainly love to debate. But for me, this law school thing, I wasn't very good. I was good at moot court, if that counts for anything. That was about it.
You mentioned something early on where it almost seems like this coaching or sports was who you were. There was an identity shaping thing that you recognized, and it just resonated. And I'm wondering, as you're selecting and assessing players and or anyone to be in your organization, are you looking for a similar DNA where it's who they are, maybe rather than just something they like to do?
Well, first of all, Bronco, that's a really good observation. Yeah, I didn't realize it. Obviously, my coach realized it before I did. I love this stuff. I love everything about athletics. I love the fight. I love the camaraderie. I love the team. I mean, I love everything about sports. So I think that's a really good insight. And so you're right. In assembling my team, basically recruiting similarly, I guess, idealistic kinds of personalities. And what we're interested in is, I don't know how many of us in the coaching profession are really interested in, winning championships as a priority. I can't believe that anyone that's been in it as long as I have been looks at that as a priority. Because boy, if that's your priority, you're going to be disappointed a lot. And so and maybe the religion stuff helped me in this direction. me and my staff, we're interested in human development. And obviously, I think if you're doing a good job at a collegiate level, you are in the human development business, because that's basically what you're doing. And all the sports, I guess, culture that you've surrounded these kids with is just an avenue to explore who they are when things are going well, who they are when things aren't going well. One of my favorite statements was made by a UNC professor when they were asking all of these people that were winning teaching awards at UNC. They asked everyone, what was the greatest teacher, or who was the greatest teacher you ever had and why? And most of them are saying, well, my kindergarten teacher was, my motivational force, or I had a graduate student that was a part of my PhD that really inspired me, or, blah, 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 blah. My favorite answer was from this comparative literature professor that said, the greatest coach of my life was failure. And that resonated with me, because here's what I love about sports. What I love about sports is it's really developing you to be incredibly resilient, because every single day in practice, you're not going to win everything. You're certainly not going to win every game you compete in. And so what you're developing is this capacity to get knocked down and then basically get up. And so I think sports teaches all of us so many positive life lessons. And so for me, the human development piece was a priority. And obviously, Bronco, you'll be excited to know, I was raised a Catholic, but I converted to the Mormon Church. I converted 2 years into my adulthood after I had gotten married. And I loved everything about the Mormon Church. In fact, because when I graduated from UNC, I was selling life insurance door to door. And all of a sudden, I see these two guys dressed just like me. And I asked them, well, what are you guys selling? And they said, well, let us come over to your house and we'll tell you what we're selling. And so I set up an appointment, and I didn't know who they were, and I didn't know what they were selling, but these were two Mormon missionaries. But honestly, I love it. I love the fact that they're continuing to educate me spiritually in the most positive way. They're helping me frame the way I am teaching my own kids. I have book clubs all over the place, and my spring book club is LDS. The freshmen read Hiram Smith's The 10 Successful, Natural Laws of Time and Life Management. He was the Franklin side of Franklin Covey, and the sophomores read, Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah. And if you look at both books and you have any sort of biblical understanding, all those books is theology converted into secular wisdom. Mm-hmm. And so those were absolutely two brilliant men that knew how to teach the world, basically Mormon theology. So, and so a lot of my principles in teaching my kids are basically LDS principles. Yeah. So for me, I've learned so much from the church, and I've really appreciated every leadership position they've given me. Some of them completely unwarranted, by the way. But anyway, so a lot of that has shaped my coaching progression.
I love the narrative, and I love the comprehensive view. And more than anything, when I was asked, as I was a head coach, what am I doing and why? I'm developing young people through college football. College football just was this powerful platform that gave me motivated learners to really teach things that were so impactful beyond the game. The game was just the way to capture their attention. that everything else was the platform to really make a difference. And this building resiliency idea, I love Angela Duckworth's work on grit and just the value of resiliency. And is there more important of a skill or trait than resiliency, the ability to have fortitude, right? To keep going. It just is, I see people giving up way too easy. And as I listen to you, I'm wondering so many things, which is great. As you consider the landscape now, and we see the monetary values attached to, especially football, but as we see the landscape shifting and maybe the external environment shifting, number one, I'm super excited and encouraged that remains your purpose and motive for the program. I'm not sure how many others are intentionally doing so. I'm wondering, as you see your colleagues and just college sports in general, if you're feeling a shift moving away from kind of the things you and I are talking about to more entertainment, more commercialism, or if you think there's a lot of folks still just trying to do or align similar philosophical to what we're talking about?
Bronco, that's a great question. And I think you're asking the right question because I think too many of us have, I guess, the wrong ambition when we coach. And there's a great book written by David Brooks that all of our leadership council reads in preseason at the University of North Carolina. Actually, you read the book all summer, and then we talk about it in preseason. And his book is The Second Mountain. And the second mountain is a wonderful metaphor for the mountain we should be climbing, because most of us just are thinking about climbing that first mountain.
Yep.
That first mountain are your resume virtues, to get paid a lot of money, to win championships. But eventually, anyone that's serious about coaching, you eventually understand that's not really your mission. And then when you start, I guess, exploring is the second mountain. The second mountain, and obviously this is directly related to the LDS Church and anyone that has deep spirituality, and that's to basically live for a purpose, to live for something beyond yourself, to live for something higher than you are. And then you really get into the nitty-gritty of, I guess, chasing joy. Because there's an illusion about climbing that first mountain. The first illusion is, when you achieve all these things, when you start making a lot of money, or when you start, winning championships or something, you're going to be happy. And you have this illusion that that's all you need. I'm just going to be happy. And so, yeah, I win a national championship, I'm going to be happy. And of course, none of that happens. Anyone that's won anything will tell you that just doesn't happen. And all of a sudden you're thinking, well, clearly it's because, I need to be paid more money and that'll make me happy. And of course, that doesn't do anything for you either. And so what I love about David Brooks's book is the metaphor he's presenting to us, which is, yeah, we need to climb two mountains. And the faster we can get to climbing the second mountain, the more joyful our lives are going to be. So it's about cementing relationships, about developing deep friendships, about selecting the people that you want to sort of be with to impact on your life in the most positive way. And we have so many cliches that we teach our kids with. We tell them, and I think I stole this from a football coach, heck, I don't know, Bronco, if this was yours or Nick Saban's, but someone said once, you're going to be the average of the 7 people you hang out with most. Therefore, choose wisely. We bring up that cliche all the time. And I tell every one of my kids, make sure in your group of 7 close friends, one of them is a scholar, because you're going to need that person in your circle, certainly while you're an academician here at the University of North Carolina. Make sure one has a very deep and profound principle center, whether it's spiritual or secular, but make sure that's a part of it. If you want to be an extraordinary athlete, make sure some of them are at least committed to their own athletic development. But also make sure these are people you enjoy being with, that friendships, and we teach the kids about friendships because these days, because they all live on their phones, they don't know how to develop a friend. A friend is someone you enjoy being with, you enjoy talking to, and that you can depend on. Please don't make your phone your friend. Because the biggest issue that all of us are fighting right now is the best friends for most of the kids I recruit are their phones. And there's nothing more crippling than having this device that you walk around with that basically rules your life, that sort of judges you on whether or not you're attractive enough, or whether or not you're popular enough, or whether or not you're cool enough. And all you're getting from this phone is the insipid impression that you're absolutely nothing. Certainly relative to the rest of the world, you're nothing. And so, no, be valued. Your phone doesn't value you. You just turn it on. So get connected with the people around you. And so for me, a part of the mission for most of these kids that we recruit is, okay, who are your 7 best friends on this team? If they struggle to name 7, they're in trouble. And most of them struggle to name 7. Yeah, most of us can name 1 or 2. That's not enough. And it's so interesting that we're having this conversation right now. My wife and I are on this Netflix documentary thing of blue zones. Blue zones are cultures where the people live beyond the age of 100. So they talk about Okinawa, they talk about Sardinia, they talk about all these places in the world where so many of these people are living into their hundreds. And what are the core elements of their survival? They are in communities that love them, that take care of them. I mean, it's just so incredible how these things that we're talking about right now are so critical for your survival. I mean, so for me, these are things we talk about all the time with our kids. We want them to develop close connections with as many people as possible. And obviously, if possible, and obviously we let the kids select this, we want them to connect with us. And I have to give my men's basketball coach full credit. Hubert Davis, in his first year, first of all, took Krzyzewski down twice, which is wonderful when you're a Tar Heel. We beat them in his last game in Cameron, which was overjoyed. And then, of course, we knocked him out of the NCAA tournament in the semifinal. And his team basically was not a great team. They were an ordinary team. And all of us on campus were trying to parse what made them special. And we all started adopting this philosophy that Hubert Davis believed in, which is he required all 12 of his scholarship players to come by the office every day and say hello to every member of his coaching staff. And I'm thinking to myself, that is just sheer genius. That's sheer genius. And he said when they came by, basketball was rarely going to be a conversation. It was going to be what's going on in your life, how are your parents doing? What's your brother and sister up to? What are your ambitions, post-professional basketball? And so you got to really know the kids in the most real and positive way. And so all these things I think are critical for all of us. We need human connection. And I'm not sharing this with profoundly in a way that I'm trying to explain the United States right now, but I really dislike where we are. I just dislike our tribal nature. I dislike that we have hate groups now, and we have hate groups for the wrong reason. One of the reasons our kids read David Brooks is because he's a conservative, but we also have our kids read David Foster Wallace's This Is Water, which is the greatest commencement address I have ever read in my life. It is radically liberal, just like David Brooks's philosophy in The Second Mountain is radically conservative. And what we love about the conclusion of our conversations about these two extraordinary men and their philosophies, they arrive at the same place. So if you're a true Republican and a true conservative, and you're our true liberal, you guys are going to arrive at the same place. So please embrace each other. It's like one of my favorite Michael Jordan comments when he was being chastised for not being a cultural warrior for Black athletes, or basically the African-American population. And his statement was great. He says, well, Republicans buy shoes too. And so he didn't want to alienate anyone. And you know what? I love that, even though obviously that's sort of a mercenary statement. I like that. I don't want to have, classifications of human beings. I don't want to have one group hate the other group because of, who they voted for. Because if you look at the core principles of both, I guess, political parties, we arrive at exactly the same place. And obviously, the problem with the paid liars in Fox News is no one knows what the truth is anymore, because basically that's being certified as truth. And of course, it's not. But if we go to the core conservative principles, they're outstanding. If you go to the core liberal principles, they're outstanding. So let's unite the clans. My gosh, let's unite the clans. And on my team, everyone knows. I had one girl one year, and obviously in collegiate environments, most of the culture is liberal. And I had this one wonderful conservative that says, Anson, Trump just won the election. Do you mind if I wear all red to practice tomorrow? I said, not a problem. Go to town. And of course, she's wearing all red in practice. And now she's being attacked by half of my team. And I said, no. She's allowed to vote for whomever she pleases. And I will defend that to my death. None of you guys are going to try to shame her or basically repudiate her for who she voted for. As long as she treats everyone on this roster with respect, black, white, Republican, Democrat, she is a part of my culture. You are not going to attack her for who she voted for. And so to this day, I'm very close to her and her family because they know I will protect her opinion to the death. And that's the case in my diverse culture. We will protect everyone.
You know, I love the approach, and there's so much value in that approach. As I listened to a talk just last night, and it talked about labels being limiting, isms dividing, and we have lots of isms, and we have ageism, sexism, racism. We have lots of isms and lots of labels, and instant labeling really lets so many people off the hook of really doing the deep work of getting to know someone. And in our program, at least at the University of Virginia, I simply would not work with anyone I didn't like or recruit someone I didn't like. And you mentioned friendships. That means that you enjoy their company, but you couldn't wait to talk to them. You couldn't wait to see him. And I used the simple kind of litmus test of, if I had a half hour only, would I want to go find this person to do something with them? And I found if I surrounded myself with those type of people, that culture, even though there were differences and wide-ranging differences, there was a commonality of connectedness, and the output really was joy. It was a joyful organization, and that didn't mean perfect, and it didn't mean guaranteed wins, but it did mean fun. It did mean joy. It did mean competing, and it also meant, you used another word that I really liked, you could depend on them. And wow, is that powerful. And so it's fascinating, and I think powerful to hear, with so much division, and you're seeing it even within your team, that you're making a stand and maybe modeling, maybe on for a broader perspective, how and what that should look like to bring people together. And I think it's needed, and college sport can do that. The visibility and scope and scale of college sport, man, is it a powerful ambassador for good if used.
Bronco, I completely agree, and I appreciate that statement. And you've experienced this, and yeah, we've got to figure out a way to unite the clans. I don't like what's happening to my country. We've all got to get together and agree on the right direction, because I hate watching us get torn apart. And you're right. I think when you hang out with someone long enough, you're going to see the humanity in them. And regardless of who they vote for or whatever, we can connect on a human level. And that should be our ambition, certainly for all of us involved in sport.
Yeah, really love that. And I love the analogy of your, or the methods of your basketball coach. And one of the things I used to counsel players on my team, if they were having trouble with someone else, I said, have you had a meal with them? Have you sat down and had a meal with them? And so in UNC basketball, players are coming to say hello to people. They're having to go out of their way, probably walk and plan, which is sacrifice. So they're investing effort into someone else. And it might have been a rule. However, eventually, I bet it was more of a pull than a push. And they were kind of drawn to connecting. And we all need connecting. There's a great book, and I've shared this on the podcast before, Irresistible, talking about the power of the cell phone, the most addictive device known to man. And so you've already framed that really well. The connections with humankind is powerful. It's needed. And it's just fun to hear your emphasis on that. And so if you were, maybe we'll finish with this. If you were to advise now, gosh, someone that's coming up in the ranks to be a head coach of any sport or to enter college athletics, I don't know, what advice or what counsel would you give them as they enter this powerful platform to build people? How would you advise them as they were starting?
Well, obviously, I can tell already that you're exceptionally well read. I think what's critical for us is there's so much extraordinary information out there if we will just hunt it. So I think the most important thing is for all of us to keep learning. So be a lifetime learner. And for me, that's reading. And again, I was never much of a scholar, but I love to read. I love ideas. And I think committing yourself to continuing to educate yourself, to become a reader of good books, of, good principles. I'm one of these guys that, reads all the greatest business books, because I think I can be taught a lot of things by all of these remarkable people in the business world. But also, honestly, what the LDS Church guides me towards in reading is also critical. So, but also have a balance in what you read. I mean, I told this to someone a long time ago. If I just read what I wanted to, all I would read is biographies. And I think I would be really limited if I didn't read the other things. And so, as everyone knows that knows me well, if you come to my home and were to come into my bedroom, you would see 10 to 15 books stacked up on my cabinet right next to my bed. The books are all different. There are certainly leadership books. There are books about spirituality. There are books about differences in men and women. There are biographies, because boy, do I love reading biographies. But there's a huge range of things that I read. And I'm inspired by all kinds of things that I read. So I think the critical first step that all of us have to embrace is the illusion that you know everything, because what you'll start to realize when you start reading everything is you know virtually nothing. And so to embrace that right out of the gate. So remain humble, and then just be an aggressive, active learner. Be humble about it, and then chase things like this. Because did you mention Irresistible was the book? Yeah,
I did.
So I've memorized that. So believe it or not, you've just paid Amazon $2, because I'm going to certainly order that book, because I want to learn, from the things that have inspired you. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think the young coach has to just embrace the fact that every single night I try to read 2 to 3 hours as I'm falling asleep. And I think that's absolutely critical. And then discuss it, which is why, and this is crazy, I never turn down a podcast. Never. I have been interviewed by these two 12-year-olds over in Durham that have this podcast. They brought me on 2 or 3 times now. I will never not agree to do their podcast. And you guys know this because you're in the business. It's amazing how much you learn from talking to people. Not so much only that you learn from them. It's amazing what you learn about yourself when you're asked a question and all of a sudden you have to answer it and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't know that's how I was going to answer that. And what's also interesting, when these people send me you're going to ask me, I don't want to know what you're going to ask me. I do not want to have a rehearsed answer for any question you give me. So I'd rather you just come up with your list of questions and fire away, because I'm curious during this particular moment how I would answer this particular question. One of my favorite recent ones is this person asked me, well, Anson, what are you an expert in? I had a line prepared because I was listening to the Rachel Maddow show, and she had brought an expert on, and the expert turned it on her and said, Rachel, what are you an expert in? And I actually saw her reflecting for a minute, and her head was bobbing around. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, she's actually thinking about how to answer this question. Her answer was absolutely brilliant. She said, I am an expert in reading comprehension. And what I love about listening to her is she explains things to me that I don't understand. And so I started to reflect on what I'm an expert in. And so am I an expert in soccer? Well, I certainly know something about soccer. But I think there are millions of people out there that know more about soccer than I do. But the more I thought about it, I think I am an expert in something. I am an expert in competition. I know how to compete. I know how to motivate my athletes to compete. I know how to drive people to the next level in their own development mentally, because that's my strength. I have spent my life trying to beat everyone to death in the most positive way in everything I've ever done. And so you'll love this now that I'm, 72 years old. So my 12 or 13-year-old son, I just beaten him in something, for the 4,000th time, and he's got tears in his eyes. He says, Dad, am I ever going to beat you in anything? I said, Donovan, eventually you're going to beat me in everything. And then he thought for a second. He said, chess? I said, no, I'm never going to let you beat me in chess. But basically, for me, that's my expertise. I've always been, I was a 4'11" freshman in high school. It's sort of like the stories about the fastest people in the world. The fastest people in the world are the 6th, 7th, or 8th sibling.
Yes.
Because they've spent their lives.
I've read that research.
Yes, spent their lives trying to keep up with their older brothers and sisters. I have spent my life clawing to try to compete with the people in my own age, because I was so small growing up. And so as a result, I have developed into a fierce competitor that wins not because of anything except mentality. So I understand competition. And so I am an expert in competition.
I love that. And so many folks are not self-aware. And when they self-assess, they're completely inaccurate because they just simply won't ask or listen to true feedback, because sometimes that's hard to hear. And to be that clear on what you're an expert in is a valuable exercise. I also love and will not take questions in advance because I love the contemplation and the reflection required, even if my answer isn't appealing, whether it's a live interview or et cetera. And sometimes it's to my own detriment, but I love the growth that happens through the reflection in the moment. And wow, is that powerful? And growing is hard, but it's great. And what an enlightening conversation. And so I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate the perspective, the breadth and depth of topics already, and just a lot to think about. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Bronco, we're cut from the same cloth. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this interview and how much I agree with everything you've said.
Thank you.
Well, Anson, a terrific episode, and I think we might have to have you on down the road again, just because number one, you never turned down podcasts. So that's always great to hear as someone who helps book this. But terrific insight, and it's always great about this podcast too. Is we never end up talking shop or what's going on in the field, but we are talking after the Women's World Cup. I know you're rooting there for the three Lionesses, given a couple of your personal connections there. But just what is the state of the women's soccer game, and how much more kind of growth is there out there?
Well, honestly, it's going through the roof, and I just can't believe it. Obviously, Australia, New Zealand, the attendance was extraordinary. The viewership all over the world was extraordinary. Barcelona, in their last two home games, had over 91,000 people paying top dollar to watch their women's professional team play. So if we're going to start to attract crowds of 91,000 in women's football, the game has changed. And now the millionaires across the United States are jumping into our pro league, which means our young women will be paid more and more. The United States has a unique leadership position because even though we're not world champions anymore, we are the leaders in basically equality. So there's not a national team out there that doesn't respect the United States for the way we lead in the right way. We've always fought for equal pay. We've always represented the LGBT community incredibly well. And so for all the right reasons, the United States is still a spiritual and cultural leader in women's football. But now they're starting to get paid. They're getting paid because people are watching, but they're also getting paid because people are fighting for them. And it's not just women. What I love about the men's national team, when the women were fighting for equal pay, the men's national team jumped in with the women. And so obviously there are champions on both sides of the gender divide. And we love it. So our game's taking off in the most positive way. I'm trying to figure out a way how to sell out my 4,200 seat, soccer stadium. So that's where I am. So I'm still at sort of a grassroots, marketing level, but I think that should be our moral imperative as well. Wherever you are for the sport that you, support, figure out ways to buy season tickets to all the teams that live nearby. If you can afford it, support the teams and the people around you. And our game, honestly, Brian, is taking off like a rocket. So the state of the game is very healthy. And I'm very proud of where we are, but also where we're going.
Well said, and completely agree. And Anson, again, we'll have to have you back on. Hopefully, after your 45th season there concludes there in Chapel Hill. But I know you guys got off to a great start, and we're looking forward to following you the rest of the way. Thank you so much for jumping on with us.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, for Anson Dorrance and Bronco Mendenhall, I'm Bryan Fischer. We'll catch you again next week here on HeadCoachU.